And we're live, episode 5 of Athletic Insights. I'm joined today by my guest, Victoria Everett. Victoria, how are you doing?
Great, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for coming in. Just really quickly, Athletic Insights is a podcast which is to be a resource for youth sports organizations, coaches, parents, and young athletes looking to get a glimpse in behind the scenes of elite athletics. Like I said, today our guest is Victoria Everett, and she was a Division I rower for Cornell. So Victoria, just tell us a little bit about your youth sports background in Brockville and what led you to rowing.
So I have played sports my entire life. I would say the earliest official sport I did was downhill ski racing, right. Which I did with my sister. We played a lot of sports together growing up. So there's never really a time that I wasn't involved in organized sports. We moved to Brockville in 2002, which means I was 7 at the time. And one of my fondest Brockville sport memories is house league soccer,
right?
Which I played. When did I stop playing? I mean, all through elementary school. And so that was a great thing to be involved with.
What was your fondest moment of it though? What about soccer was so fond for you?
It's funny. The one thing that comes to mind, and this is more of, me revisiting a fun memory. One time at kickoff when we were in the small fields, I scored a goal at kickoff. So someone just tapped it and I was like, I scored from... That was probably the highlight. That's when I peaked.
And that's when you knew...
my soccer peaked.
And that's when you knew you were special, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was also double the size of anyone on the field. So that helped. And then rowing, I didn't start until much later. I started rowing in about 2010. And I started doing that because I couldn't play my favorite sport, basketball, at the time, because I just come off an ACL reconstruction and I could only do things that were in line. So
linear.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Why don't you touch base just a little bit on all the knee surgeries and the injuries you've had and just kind of the perseverance that gave you, and then
Yeah. I think something no one tells you as a kid is that injury is going to be a part of your sporting career, whether you plan for it or not. So when it does happen, not to let it be this huge obstacle that you're like, oh my God, why has this happened to me? Just be this is a part of being an elite athlete,
right? Is
getting injured. So, I mean, obviously there are things you can do to prevent yourself from getting injured, but you can't stop everything. So yeah, my first official injury, grade 9, it was 2 weeks into high school, and I went on a tour with the senior girls basketball team.
Okay.
We had a little intramural scrimmage, and my first shift of my first game on the senior team, grade 9, I was making a cut, and as I cut, girl stepped on my foot, bottom half of my leg stayed behind. Goodbye ACL.
Right. Yeah.
So, and I mean, was there kind of minor injuries leading up to it? Maybe. So anyways, I had ACL reconstruction in grade 9, and again in grade 11. I tore it again playing basketball. Must have been basketball. I don't really remember. Yeah. And then had other meniscus reconstructions in between. So I've had 4 knee surgeries total. And yeah, they've definitely put me on a different path. I think I imagine I would have pursued more basketball if I had never been injured, which wouldn't have happened in this universe.
Right.
And yeah, how did I persevere?
Yeah, did going through those injuries and recovering and still being able to perform kind of give you a different perspective on sport? Do you appreciate it a little bit more? How do you view it with that in that sense?
It's kind of like when you get sick And then you're like, wow, I'm going to appreciate being healthy so much. You know, you get a cold and you're like, oh, this is the worst. Like,
I'm never going to complain anymore.
Yeah. I feel like it's something like that.
Okay.
It also taught me a lot about sitting on the sidelines. You
were
know,
observing? Were you kind of learning in that perspective? Or,
yeah. And I think that at the time it suited me because like I was pretty quiet anyways, and like I enjoyed watching and like learning from my other teammates. It definitely put a twist on like little awkward high schooler me because I was super self-conscious about being on crutches.
Okay.
Like, you know, walking around the BCI hallways with my crutches, and I just felt like it like brought attention to me that I didn't want.
Okay.
But I digress. You know, it just showed me that I could be stronger and needed to be stronger, and ultimately, you know, turned me into the athlete I am today, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, you've had an extremely successful career. Not everyone gets to, you know, do the Division I thing and have the options you had. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about the recruiting process? That, like, I love when you talk about it. So for listeners at home, Victoria is one of the athletes from Brockville who got to talk to the real D1 schools that everyone grows up dreaming about visiting or having an opportunity to talk to, or schools like Harvard and Michigan and Cornell, etc. So just tell us how the recruiting process started for you. Were you reaching out? Were they reaching out to you? And, you know.
Yeah. The recruiting process was totally driven by me. I had no D1 rowing coaches reaching out to me before I started that conversation. I took a list. I took the NCAA top 20 rowing schools, and I created an email format, and I copy and pasted to every single head and assistant coach on that list. Yeah. So lots of emails. And then as a result of that, I was filling out a lot of the like recruiting forms on their website. Like if you go to a school's website, like there's always going to be a little recruiting form to fill out. And then
just to get into their system.
Yeah, exactly. And then after that, it was a lot of phone calls, talking mostly to the assistant coaches, because in the US, like a head coach's responsibility is rarely recruiting.
Right. Usually it's, they've got their hands full.
Yeah. And so then I kind of started to slim down my list, thinking about what I wanted in a school. And then I took, you can take 5 official visits, and I did take all 5.
Where'd you go?
I went in order. I went Duke, then Syracuse, and then my third one was supposed to be UCLA.
Oh, wow.
But I canceled it, and that was interesting.
That must have been a tough decision.
Yeah. It was hard. I was tired, and I got to the point where, like, even though, like, California was my dream, the flight for me wasn't going to be worth it. Like, I wanted to be within driving distance of home.
Sure.
So then, you know, a few weeks before my visit, I called the assistant coach and I said, I can't make it.
Yeah, it's just not for me. You wanted to be a little closer to home. That's super
And then
reasonable.
he did try and like pressure me into it and say like, oh, you'll have to like reimburse me for these things. Like, you should still come, like just check it out. And I was like, I'm not going. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of just have to tell them what, and I would say like, never say anything that is like final, because you always want to like take a step back and be able to talk to someone, bounce it off someone else, and then make that final decision.
Keep doors open too, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Kept a lot of doors open. But obviously closed the UCLA door.
Sure, yeah.
And then after that, I went to Michigan, and then Harvard, and then I went to Cornell later.
Right.
Yeah, and those schools like have similarities, but also differences. So I wanted to go on official visits that I felt like were going to give me a different taste of different kinds of schools. Duke was beautiful, and the student athlete facilities were just unreal. Yeah. Like when they take you on the campus tour, obviously spent like a decent amount of time in and around the basketball court, and they show you the locker room, and I'm I'm going to come here and
They're
walk
flexing.
on the basketball
Yeah.
team.
Yeah. Right.
And then, yeah, I'm trying to think. Michigan, ultimately, my decision after all my visits came down to Michigan and Harvard. And Michigan was pretty tempting. And I felt like that was going to be my like ultimate D1 experience.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like that's where you went if you were like, I want to go to the Olympics and like this is what's going to get me there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So, yeah. But ultimately, the allure of like the Harvard history and academics, I mean, if you're offered an opportunity to go there, it's pretty tempting.
Right.
So I did actually commit to Harvard, and then like later that month tore my meniscus again. And when I called to tell the assistant coach that, she essentially unrecruited me.
Right. Yeah. That happens. That
yeah.
happens. So like one thing for the young kids at home to understand is like you really need to make sure that you're making the best decision for you. Because as much as those coaches might like you and some might form great relationships with you while you're recruiting, to an extent you're just a number, right? Especially once you get to university in the States. And you know that's just the system. It's the way it is. They're getting paid to do a job, and it's performance based. So you definitely shouldn't take that personally.
Yeah.
But it's something that you need to be aware of if you're a young athlete going into this. You can't go in too wide eyed and naive.
Yeah.
Right.
Like in the same way that I was a number for them, I always made sure to remind myself that like they were also a number to me. You know, like if someone wasn't interested in me, I was like, that's fine.
Your loss.
Yeah, exactly. Like I can go somewhere else. And if they don't want me, like that's kind of how I felt about Harvard. I was like, if you don't want me at your school, you better believe I don't want to row for you.
Yeah, that 100% makes sense to me. I think it's the best way to get the most out of people is to make sure your athletes know they're valued and respected. And just to finish talking about recruiting, do you have any advice for just the recruiting process in general for the next generation?
Yes, I do. Big tip. So you're going to go on your recruiting trips and you're going to be super tired and exhausted and overwhelmed. The first thing you want to do after you leave is write down your initial thoughts because they're never going to be as fresh in your mind as they are in that moment. And there might be little things that don't seem important, like it could be a hunch or like, so, you know, I was flying to a lot of these places at the time. I would get on the plane, take out my notebook, write the name of the school, and then just fill the page with thoughts.
Right.
So I highly, highly recommend doing that because I definitely came back to those notes when I was making my final decisions.
And I think journaling can be so important in the athletic process in general. Like, I didn't do this in high school, but it's advice I now give is get your young athlete or your child just a journal to write, you know, what they ate, how they slept, how did they feel that day? Because they'll start to see patterns. If they, you know, they get 6 hours of sleep and they don't eat enough and they underperform, they're going to see that connection when they're writing stuff down. So I think just the journaling, recruiting process or not, a great piece of advice. One thing I really wanted to get your take on was just the role that that role models and mentors can play in sport and athletics, and you know who you looked up to with respect to that.
For sure. I feel, I mean, back at BCI, Mr. Larry Smith.
Right. Yeah.
What a wonderful guy. Haven't spoken to him in years, but he at the time was a great mentor for me. He really he supported me in my academics and also, I think, helped me to believe in myself as a young athlete. Really, I feel like when I kind of like found my groove, I only really found my groove as a person and as an athlete once I got to Cornell. And a big part of that was figuring out my mental health.
Right.
It was the first time where, I mean, really, it was towards the end of my first year. I'll never forget it. And I got to a point where I was like, I can't keep doing this.
In your first year?
In my first year.
Was it the workload or what were you struggling with?
Yeah, I was just like, school was really hard. I was spending all my time studying. And if I wasn't studying, I was rowing. Like my work-life balance as they say.
It was non-existent.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel that way too with myself. I've always been someone who's been too hard on myself, and I've wanted to, do my homework, do my training, get what I needed done to be an athlete done. And then if I had 5 minutes to do something outside of that realm, that was a bonus.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's a fine line between whether or not you can have a work-life balance as an athlete. One of the things, I know Kobe Bryant, someone everyone talks about, the Mamba mentality. He full well said, like, you can't be a great friend and be the best at something. You can be a good friend, but you can't be, so you got to kind of pick and choose. So yeah, I think that was a great point. But mentors, I know you had a nutritionist coach who played a big role in your life. So why don't you just talk about him a little bit?
Yeah, so I met him my first year. His name is Clint Wattenberg. He now works for the UFC at a performance institute because that wrestling is his passion. But at the time, he was a sports nutritionist at Cornell, and he taught me a lot about what it meant to, what he says, fuel yourself for performance. And not worry so much about what your body looks like and more what it can do. You know, the old kind of
conundrum.
Yeah.
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 And then, at the same time, like, I feel some coaches can pressure you, like, can make assumptions about what your body looks like and how that relates to performance. And I think I look forward to those kind of stigmas being broken down.
Yeah.
Because as we know, and as some people are learning, what your body looks like doesn't define like how fast and strong it can be.
Especially that girl came out with, I forget her name. We'll find it and we'll post the YouTube video somehow. But there's a girl for running for Nike, and she said the caption was, "I was the fastest girl in the world until I joined Nike," and I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. You know what I mean? So I was like, Nike has all the resources. Like, why would Nike make? So they had a completely random number in their head. They had this runner. They said, you need to be 113 pounds to perform optimally. And this girl had never been sub 120, I don't think.
Yeah.
And they forced her to do that. And it turned her into from the best time in the world for whatever her event was to average, if that. And so I think it's really important that, like, young girls and boys at home, that body dysmorphia is a real thing.
Yeah.
Men struggle with it just as much as women,
For
100%, maybe more sometimes. And it's just kind of the different extremes, A lot of men who are huge and muscular, they don't see themselves as that. And then the other way, my perspective on it is throw the scales away. Like, how do you feel? How do you look? Are you getting better? Are you performing? To me, that's what athletics is about. So I think that was a good point. And then one other thing that you did with that role model, or your mentor, was you guys had that Body Positive Cornell.
Yeah.
So why don't you just touch base about that a little bit?
Yeah. So that was an initiative that Clint had been working on before we met. So after he and I worked together individually, he asked me if I would help him, like, bring this program to campus. And really what he was doing was empowering me, like, to take control of my own kind of issues, while at the same time, like, spreading the good word, so to speak, to other students at Cornell. So the program is still running today, and I hope that, continues to grow. The way that it's based on an organization in Berkeley, and basically it's the standard is an 8-week curriculum where every week you get together in groups of like 10 is what we did at Cornell.
Like a support group, like an information kind of thing?
Yeah, like support/information. Like, basically you come, you set ground rules, and you just talk about, like, why do we think the things we do about our body and food? Where do those ideas come from? When should they be challenged?
Culture.
And, like,
Right.
Yeah. And I think people learned... the feedback we got is, like, people learned a lot about themselves, and they were able to just kind of, break out of that framework that says, foods are good and bad, when really it's food.
We know that scientifically all sugar or all carb sources, they break down to glucose in the body, and we don't, I'm pretty sure we believe, modern science believes that a glucose molecule from sugar or a glucose molecule from a sweet potato, eventually, while the glycemic content will be different, like, and how fast you'll get that energy, it's still the same molecule at a base level, right? So,
and for all the students out there, glucose is the preferred source of energy of the brain.
And for the immediate energy systems, you need glucose to start glycolysis to produce ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate, which is going to fuel your anaerobic alactic energy system. So this is the stuff that takes the athlete from being good to great when you understand the fuel, right? I look at food as fuel. That's you got to kind of look at man as machine almost.
And then also, if you're like me and you love cooking and eating delicious things, then it's also fun.
Right. What has to date been your biggest success in sport and your biggest perceived failure, and how have they shaped you? Because you're, Victoria, you're a great role model. Like, one of the things about you and your sister that I really appreciate is like you're both strong, powerful athletes. You're comfortable with who you are, but it took you time to get there, right? So like, there's ups and downs in sports, and just touch base on your greatest success and your greatest failure, and then just some advice for young girls. The last time we had a conversation, me and you had kind of also talked about getting them training. Girls need to we need to help break down that those stigmas in the weight room. Right? Yeah.
I would say my biggest success in sport was my second year at Cornell. I had finally kind of like addressed my mental health, and I was really happy, and I had made these amazing friends. Like, it was the first time that I made really deep social connections.
Ever?
Yeah.
Wow. Good for you.
Yeah.
Good.
So that was like a really kind of liberating feeling. And I was like, kind of like there is more out there than school and rowing.
Right. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Super important to be well balanced. Right?
And that was like, coming at the age of, I don't know how old I was, like 22 or something.
Yeah. And I'm still working on that. Like I mean,
it's a lifelong journey.
Right. Exactly.
And you have to like relearn that lesson, because this whole balance thing, does the balance exist? No. The line is moving all the time. Like, there is no line. But I'll go back to my greatest success that year. I had a great relationship with my coach. I was super lucky to be working with her. And then coincidentally, I found my academic passion, and
which is?
I was going super fast in rowing. The sociology of food.
Right. Okay. Yeah. We have touched a bit.
So I'm interested in food access, distribution, food insecurity, stuff like that.
Right.
But I'm not doing that work yet.
No, that's really cool. Is that what you see yourself doing in the future, or what you hope to do?
It's one of the things I'll try. I could see myself working for like a nonprofit, doing community food work. It could be something as kind of simple as kind of like the food bank idea.
Right, yeah.
But I'm also like more interested in community gardens.
Okay.
And people kind of, getting their hands in the dirt and planting their food and
getting in touch with nature a little bit.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure. But yeah, so rowing, I was in the varsity boat, and I was going faster on the erg than I ever had, and that was really fun and exciting. And then I was something like, I don't know. I was also recognized as, I don't know, maybe like an Ivy League Team B or something. I don't know exactly what it was.
Like second team All-American kind of vibes?
Yeah.
Very cool.
So yeah, that was kind of like my happiest, fondest memory of rowing and sports. And then it also happened to come with those accolades, which I don't think necessarily happens, but for me it did. Lowest point. Been a lot of low points.
Yeah, for sure.
I think like I've definitely worked with some coaches that our kind of approaches and mentality didn't line up. So I think kind of my lowest point in rowing was when I couldn't be upfront with that person about how I felt.
The coach?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because like, as a young woman working for like an older guy, like there's just like interesting power dynamics happening there. Mm-hmm. And I think, the sooner I mean, I'll speak to young female athletes because that's been my experience. Like, you drive your own bus. This is my mom's analogy, okay? Everyone should use it. So you're driving the bus, okay? And you're going along and you're picking people up on your bus. And you're like, yeah, I'm going to get you on the bus. You're going to make my bus go where I want to go. And like, people can ride the bus for different amounts of time. And like, as soon as you kind of start to get a funny feeling that someone on your bus
isn't in your corner anymore.
Yeah. You know, like if they're not helping you get to where you need to be and like aren't empowering you to be your authentic self, then you kindly invite them off the bus.
Absolutely.
You do not need them in your
really
life.
like that analogy. My last year of football, so I had one more year of eligibility, and I was kind of teeter-tottering between the idea of playing my last year and putting my company on hold for a year, or going all in on my company and putting football to the side for now, for forever. And I ended up leaning towards the latter, but the reason essentially was because the coach that had came in, we had a great relationship the first year, and things were rolling, and then he reneged on some verbal man-to-man agreements we had made, no contract, but you shake my hand, you look me in the eyes, we're men, or women, sorry, but just, you know what I mean? People, you shake someone's hand, you come to guidelines, and he had reneged on a lot of them. And I got to a point where I was like, you know what, I don't need this anymore. This coach seems to be more interested in being the guy who turns his program around than anyone who's here right now. That's when I realized at this point, I'm a number to this guy. So I stepped away and I made the right choice for myself. So I think that's important. And that's kind of similar to your experience at Cornell as well.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say what is the feeling you have looking back on that decision?
I don't have any regrets. I made the right decision. I know I did, because I always trust my gut, and I'm now in a position where I can share my story, and you get to share your story, and then the young kids in the community and outside the community who are listening get to see what can happen before it happens. It just kind of gives them a little bit of so high schools like this, elementary schools like this, universities like that. Wow, it's eye-opening. So for me, I like how you turned it around there and started interviewing me. But you're going to be a pro at these podcasts in no time. This is the second time I've had you on. So then, did you pinpoint your lowest point there? Was
Well, I think my lowest point was my third year at Cornell. Before I realized that this coach was taking over my life in a really negative way.
Right. Right. Okay.
That's really all I have to say about that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we're just going to wrap it up here. Victoria, what is your take-home message to specifically young girls at home, but just young athletes in general who are, they're trying to do some of the things that you're doing, and they also might be going through some of the things that you've went through as an athlete? Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things I learned in my time at Cornell was just to be kinder to myself, and in being more compassionate, instead of beating myself up if I missed that workout or I feel like I ate something that didn't make me feel good, still kind of coming back and just being like, that was an experience. I'm going to be neutral towards it and move on to the next thing. Not beating myself with this guilt and shame, because ultimately it just holds you back from moving on to the next greatest thing.
Absolutely.
So practicing letting go and being compassionate towards yourself, even when you don't feel like it.
Yeah, no, for sure. We all need to be kinder to other people and to ourselves, for sure, especially in elite athletics, because you're so hard on yourself and there's so much self-doubt.
Yeah.
It's a tough thing to do, for sure.
Yeah.
So, that was episode 5 of Athletic Insights. Last thing I want to say is to the kids at home listening, to the parents at home listening, if you have questions about the content for myself or Victoria or guests I've had in the past, feel free to send me a message on Facebook or Instagram, or you can email me. We'll throw my email up in the video for you. But, this is a resource for you guys. We want to hear from you. We want feedback. And I'm going to wrap it up there. So, Victoria, thank you so much for coming in again.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Perfect. And we're out.